The edge of a small Filipino village, where dirt roads turn muddy after every rain, stood a fragile wooden shack patched together with scrap boards and rusted nails. This was home to a poor carpenter and his young son. Every morning before sunrise, the father lifted his worn toolbox and walked miles to nearby towns, fixing broken chairs, doors, and roofs for a few pesos. His hands were rough, cracked, and permanently stained with sawdust, but he never complained. He worked with one goal in mind: to give his son a future brighter than his own. Inside the shack, there was little more than a thin mattress, a wooden table, and a single flickering bulb. Yet in this humble space, something magical lived. After long days of labor, the father would sit on the floor, sanding wood while humming old Filipino ballads. His son, barefoot and wide-eyed, held a battered guitar with only 4 working strings. The boy's voice, soft at first, would rise gently with the melody, filling the tiny shack and floating out into the night. Neighbors passing by would slow their steps, drawn by the unexpected beauty. Some whispered that the child's voice didn't belong in a place like this, it was meant for something bigger. The father listened silently, pride swelling in his chest, though worry followed close behind. Dreams were dangerous when money was scarce, and school fees often came before hope. On nights when hunger sat heavier than exhaustion, the father would place his calloused hand on his son's shoulder and say, "One day, your voice will build a better house than my hands ever could." The boy didn't fully understand, but he sang anyway, because singing was the only moment when poverty disappeared and the world felt kind. That night, beneath a leaking roof and a sky full of stars, a dream quietly began. The lights of America's Got Talent felt blinding compared to the soft glow of kerosene lamps back home. Standing backstage, the carpenter's son gripped his worn guitar, his hands trembling, not from fear of the judges, but from the weight of everyone he carried with him. His father's tired smile, his village's prayers, and years of sacrifice echoed loudly in his chest. When his name was called, he stepped onto the massive stage, dwarfed by the towering screens and roaring crowd. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, curious but unreadable. Asked about his background, the boy spoke softly about his father, a carpenter who built furniture for others but could barely afford a bed for himself. The audience grew quiet. This wasn't just another audition, it was a life story unfolding in real time. As he began to sing, nerves melted into instinct. His voice, raw and emotional, carried the sound of hardship, hunger, and hope. The crowd erupted in applause when he finished, and for a moment, it felt like the dream was already real. The judges praised his sincerity and tone, and he advanced to the next round. Backstage, he cried with joy while calling his father, who whispered through the phone, "You did it, Anik." But the dream didn't last forever. In the following rounds, pressure mounted. The competition grew tougher, expectations heavier. When the results were announced, his name wasn't called. Just like that, it was over. That night, in a quiet hotel room, he stared at the ceiling, replaying every note he sang. Back home, his father hid his heartbreak behind gentle words, saying, "You already won by standing there." Yet when the call ended, both father and son cried, separated by oceans, united by disappointment. The world moved on, but inside him, something broke, and something stronger began to form. The applause faded, the lights dimmed, and life returned to reality. Back in the Philippines, the young man woke before sunrise once again, but this time, not to rehearse. He rose to work. Wearing dusty boots and carrying heavy tools, he joined construction crews, lifting cement bags under the scorching sun. Each swing of the hammer reminded him of his father's hands, hands that had sacrificed everything without ever asking for recognition. At night, exhaustion pressed deep into his bones, yet sleep rarely came easily. Instead, he sat outside their small home, listening to crickets and distant traffic, his old guitar resting on his lap. Memories of the AGT stage haunted him, what he could have done better, what he should have sung. Doubt whispered that maybe his dream had been foolish from the start. One evening, after watching his father silently count coins on the table, something inside him broke open. He picked up the guitar and began to play, not to impress anyone, not to win a competition, but to tell the truth. Words poured out about sawdust-covered floors, blistered hands, skipped meals, and a father who smiled through pain. The melody was simple, but the emotion was overwhelming. This song was different. It didn't chase high notes or applause. It carried gratitude, regret, and love. It was a confession, a prayer, and a promise all at once. His father listened quietly from the doorway, unaware that he was the heart of every lyric. Over the following weeks, the song grew stronger, shaped by late nights and aching fingers. Friends who heard it fell silent, some wiping away tears. "This isn't just a song," one said. "This is your story." For the first time since his loss, hope returned, not loud or confident, but steady. The failure that once crushed him had given birth to something real. And deep inside, he knew this song wasn't finished yet. The second time he walked into the America's Got Talent theater, everything felt different. He wasn't the nervous boy chasing a miracle anymore. He was older now, steadier, carrying years of disappointment, labor, and quiet strength in his voice. Backstage, contestants warmed up nervously, but he sat alone, eyes closed, replaying the song in his mind, the song born from failure and sacrifice. When his name was announced, murmurs rippled through the audience. Some recognized him. The judges exchanged glances. Simon Cowell leaned forward, intrigued. "You've been here before, haven't you?" Simon asked. The young man nodded and smiled gently. "Yes," he replied. "I went home, worked like my father, and wrote this song." Before singing, he turned toward the crowd. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "This is for my father. He's a carpenter. He built my life with his hands, even when we had nothing." The camera cut to his father in the audience, older now, shoulders bent from years of work, eyes already shining with tears. The first note left his lips, and something extraordinary happened. The theater went completely silent. Not a cough, not a whisper. His voice carried pain, humility, and gratitude, every word landing like a confession. The lyrics painted pictures of poverty and perseverance, of dreams postponed but never abandoned. Halfway through the song, Simon lowered his gaze, his jaw tightening. He removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. The audience noticed, and gasped. Judges leaned forward, visibly moved. By the final chorus, his father was openly crying, hands pressed together in disbelief. When the last note faded, the silence lingered for a heartbeat, then the room exploded. Cheers, tears, and a standing ovation filled the theater. But the most powerful moment had already happened. In the quiet, when his story finally reached every heart in the room. The final note still hung in the air when the young man slowly lowered his head, unsure whether to breathe or speak. For a brief moment, the entire theater remained frozen, no applause, no voices, just the echo of a life laid bare in song. Then, as if moved by a single shared heartbeat, the audience rose to their feet. The standing ovation thundered through the hall, shaking the stage beneath his trembling feet. Simon Cowell stood as well, his eyes red and glistening. He took a deep breath before speaking, clearly struggling to keep his composure. "I've heard thousands of singers on this stage," he said softly, "but very few tell the truth the way you just did." His voice cracked. That song, it wasn't about winning. It was about love. The crowd erupted again, many wiping away tears. The camera cut to the father in the audience. His hands, once strong, now worn, shook as he covered his face, overwhelmed. For a man who had spent his life building things for others, this was the first time he felt truly seen. The son looked at him, eyes brimming, and whispered, "This is for you." As confetti began to fall and cheers filled the room, the judges continued to praise not just the voice, but the courage behind it. Whether or not the golden buzzer was pressed no longer mattered. In that moment, something far greater had happened. Years of struggle, sacrifice, and silent suffering had finally been acknowledged. Backstage, father and son embraced tightly, both crying without shame. The dream that began in a leaking shack had reached the world's biggest stage. The carpenter's son hadn't just returned to America's Got Talent, he had healed old wounds, honored his father, and proven that even the poorest beginnings can create the most powerful songs.